Hi, Matt Stait here again from the Festival of Martial Arts. And today I've got with me Matt Hudd. Matt, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Really good.
Oh, great. Thank you ever so much for being on board. And again, a big thanks for being another great instructor coming on board and joining the team of people that are going to be involved in this amazing event. Now, I start these conversations pretty much the same way with everybody. So could you give us a brief overview of who you are and what you do, just for those people that may not have heard of you?
Yeah, no worries. I'll try and keep it brief. But yeah, I started martial arts around about 7 or 8 years old. I can't fully remember, to be fair. With judo, did judo for quite a while. It was almost a stand-up martial arts that really attracted me, to be honest, from Monkey Magic, Bruce Lee, that sort of era. It's in the 70s. But so yeah, my dad didn't let me do kung fu because of the instructor. He's a bad bouncer, apparently, something like that. So I stuck with judo for quite a while, which I still love, to be fair, that side of things. But then I got into the kung fu. I cross-trained a lot over my time. I did Jeet Kune Do, Aikido, Taekwondo I did for quite a while. And I eventually got my black belt in Taekwondo when I was about 30, so it took me about 23 years, but I never sort of stopped training. And a lot of that, to be fair, is down to self-belief, because that's another reason why I really got into martial arts, because I was bullied and not very confident, things like that, really. So I kept sort of getting so high in my martial arts and then starting to do another one. And it took me a while before I realised this sort of pattern, if you like. So I did Taekwondo, got to black first dan in it, before getting a bit disillusioned with all the politics side of things and things like that. So started training with Jeff Thompson not long after that, which I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts, and the amount of people he's influenced, I'm just so grateful that I spent that time training with him, to be fair, because I trained with him for about 10 years, and the reality side of things, which was a big eye-opener at the time. And like yourself, when I was listening to another podcast you did the other day, I wrote the doors for a little bit and went down his path as well, after reading all his books and things like that, really, just get used to a bit of concentration and that sort of thing, really. But then after about 10 years of that sort of thing, I started training with Steve Rowe, because to me, martial arts, there's so many different avenues and there's so many different benefits from it, really. I was just wanted something else apart from the training with people that just for the reality side of things, really. So I started training with Steve Rowe. That was when Facebook started sort of moving, and I sort of read about his articles in Combat and Martial Arts Illustrated, things like that. So started training with him, went to check with him a couple of times, and then joined his instructor. A few years down the line, joined his instructor Tai Chi group, which opened up loads of doors, to be fair, with my own teaching, enhanced my own martial arts in itself. And throughout all this time, I've also been just studying a lot of kung fu as well. So that was my I've always loved kung fu from Bruce Lee, things like that. So I did started training in Algar as well. So, and that's what I teach nowadays, really, is the kung fu side of things with the Tai Chi. Did kickboxing as well, got my first dan in the kickboxing. So we teach the kickboxing side of things as well. But it's all, I find, definitely training with Steve, and I also train with Eddie Quinn a lot as well, and Nicholas Parker. All the principle side of things, with the principles, they all went through all the same classes. Get the principles right, you can make most things work, really. Posture, relaxation, that side of things. So yeah, and it took me, I think in 2012, I went full time as a martial artist. 3 years after that, I went back to work with my tail between my legs because it wasn't working. Then I got a business mentor, started to think about the business side of things a little bit more. And 3 years after that, I went back to being full time again, which has made things work. But yeah, so, and then 2017, got our own full time centre, really. So yeah, and still teaching. We've got 240 students here, really. And yeah, it's more what we teach more is about forming the community, and I look at all our students as individuals, and it's like we're not necessarily, I wouldn't call ourselves a black belt school, because our ethos is anybody can benefit from martial arts. Doesn't matter who you are. We've got classes for learning disabilities. I teach from 3 years old. But then, because of my experience with Jeff Thompson and things like that, our black belts aren't easy. So if you like, not mollycoddle people, but we make it accessible for everyone up to a certain level. And then if people want to go further and get their higher grades, then it gets a bit more hardcore sort of thing. But the way I like it, I like what we've got here, because it is a nice community. It's like, quite often I can't work because I'm too busy talking to people who have just popped in to say hello and things like that. But it's nice. It's giving back to community, really. We're a CIC company ourselves.
Yeah, that's quite a journey.
Yeah.
So let's try and roll that back a little bit, because there was an awful lot within that. So you talked at the beginning, you said about some of the influences, and you mentioned Bruce Lee, one of the obvious ones. You talked about the show Monkey, which I've just started rewatching, funny enough, just as a little bit of a retro go back. Fantastic show. Again, it very reminiscent of my own sort of boyhood watching that. But one of the things at the time was that there was usually judo and boxing, and those were the kind of things that you could find to do. Karate started coming in and things. So finding some actual kung fu stuff at the time was how did that come about? Was that just what was local to you?
Yeah, I think at the time it was before leisure centres really popped up, and they were like old tin sheds that we were training in, and they like had proper mats down and things like that. And what they did gymnastics there as well, but it was judo, and I think it was when Lao Gar really kicked off. To be fair, it's just started, if you like, then in the 70s. But I didn't know nothing about the BKFA, the organisation that ran Lao at the time. And he must have been a very early student. But since then, as I said, I've cross-trained in so many things, but it's always been Lao that's pulled me back. I've always gone back to it, because I just like the way it looks, the flowiness, the fluidness. So I've studied karate a little bit, but it's always come through. I've always gone back to, really. So yeah, I was probably very lucky, but he didn't last too long, that instructor, to be fair. So, but I said in the early 90s, then there was never a Lao Gar instructor down in Hereford, where I live. So I started training with them as well. I moved to Bristol and found Lao Gar in Bristol and Southampton. So it's always a fact to be back there for some reason.
Yeah. Well, it's a big presence in Bristol, isn't it? Always has been for Lao Gar. So, so you mentioned the wonderful Jeff Thompson, which again is something that is interesting, because he has affected so many different martial artists in so many different ways, right through from people that have never met him but are impacted by his books, right through to people like yourself who trained with him over a period of time. So not just on the seminar circuit or once or twice, but actually, a length of time period of training. So tell us a little bit about that. That must have been an interesting process, especially back in those days when Jeff was really all about the physical.
Yeah, no, definitely. Again, I used to read his articles in Combat and things like that. And I just went on a seminar down in Coventry with him, and it's just so different, really. And he was honest and things. And I was getting a bit. I don't knock other martial arts. I love all martial arts and things like that. But there's some that suits others more than other things. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff with Taekwondo I didn't understand, and it was the reality side of things at the time, because of my confidence levels and things like that. I just needed, really, and it was the people that we were training with as well. They're all pretty big. A lot of them were quite dormant anyway, sort of thing, like, really. I studied it. I did quite a few courses with him before being invited to do his black belt course. And even now, some of the stuff that Jeff was saying then, like, he was sort of getting into his metaphysical side of things, and I was finishing with him. Mark, he's still doing the reality side of things, but he's getting a lot more into the spiritual side of things. And some of the stuff he used to say then was way over my head, and it's only now that I'm linking things up, and I find it quite funny, because Steve Rowe, Jeff Thompson are two different types of martial artists, their routes have been totally different, and they're teaching the same thing, but on separate sides of the mountain, if you like.
Yes, yes.
Right? So it's sort of, but at the top, it's still exactly the same, and that really. And I'm just very grateful because I see people now that are sort of following Jeff, and he's still influencing them, but they've never trained with him. So I'm just very grateful I had the opportunity really for that amount of time. But I knew it's all come to an end because there's so much more in martial arts that I wanted to look into, really.
Oh yeah. Well, as we age, and as our own personal wants and needs change, and the way we can train and everything else, so it's an individual journey for everyone like that, isn't it? And it's a stage on that process. And so you talked then about you tried to set up a club and it wasn't very successful. And I'd like to just have a touch on that just for a little bit, because we're still in a realm where a lot of martial arts instructors think marketing, business stuff, it's like they're dirty words and you shouldn't mention them in the same space and on hallowed ground. But you said you're running a CIC, which basically means it's a charitable organization, so it's not for profit. You've got a pretty healthy student number there that you mentioned, so you're clearly having a fair bit of success with that. So what's different between that and your first attempt, the one that failed? What's the significant factors that changed it for you?
When I originally left my job, full-time employment, I just passed as a personal trainer as well. And I thought, with my personal training and my martial arts experience, I was teaching 2 nights a week at a time before I'd given up a job. I just thought it'd be easy. I just thought people would be running through the doors, be able to set it up. I had a little bit in the bank, not much. I just thought it'd be easy really, but it wasn't. People didn't come running to me. And I was struggling with bills, paying, things like that really, and I wanted a bit of a life. So I went back, luckily I went back on the bank because I worked in care at the time. So I was sort of like an agency, if you like. They just did the hours that I wanted to do, so I could fit it around, still trying to build things up while I was working. And as I said, I contacted a mentor as well, which helped loads, rebranded it, sort of thing, really. And I'm still learning. I'm still making cock-ups. But we're moving, we're growing in that, really.
Yeah. Well, it's as you said, it's a journey, isn't it? It's a process, but it's I think it's what's interesting about the world now is that more and more people are beginning to see that there has to be a business element towards it for it to actually work, and for you to be able to teach people to the level that you want to. That's something that now is coming to the fore more and more, and it's interesting how that's progressing and changing the martial arts landscape, if you will, and how that looks. So how do you see your future looking then in regards to, you mentioned your club was growing, you mentioned your continuation of training. How do you see this panning out for you in the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
Expanding the team, really, growing the team. That's when, but moving into the business side of things, that's one of the hardest things that I've ever tried, and I've spoken to a lot of other people in my situation, is letting go, giving responsibility to other people, really. And getting the right team together makes a big difference. And I've made a lot of screw-ups and cock-ups and things like that. And I've just taken on my sister. Not too sure about it, but in the last couple of months, and just because of the way she is with social media side of things, she's belongs to loads of groups. I've stopped paying any money for advertising and things like that at the moment, because she's growing things organically and things like that. So getting the right team members makes a big difference. So now it's really, we've got a good coaching team, but it's really getting them, expanding them. I want another full-time instructor if you can, but all things like that do take a while, because you can't just advertise because they've got to be in with your system, they've got to know your culture, and they've got to know your syllabus as well and things like that. And so it's building things up, really. Team about 20 people really, but there's 4 of us on the books, so expanding, working. I'm trying to cut my working hours down and giving other people more work. That's my dream, really, at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, so I said there's lots of exciting opportunities in the future moving forward. I think depending on which side of the fence you sit. But so when it comes to the festival itself, then my friend, you're coming along, which is fantastic. You're going to be doing some teaching, which is great. Have you got anything in mind as to what you're going to be looking at?
I'm open to most things really. As I said, it's the kung fu and the tai chi that I'm more passionate about than anything really. I'd like to sort of just maybe do a bit of Tai Chi, but link it up to how valuable it can be for the martial arts, really. Definitely, I mean, I was talking to Chris Parker, the senior leader in the Silat side of things with Eddie Quinn, and he was saying about that to be a good martial artist, you need the feminine side of you because there's so much sort of testosterone and to relax and things like that. And that just hit a lot of home truths with myself, really. And I find, because I attract a lot of people from other styles as well, because of my own experience, things like that. And so many people are coming to have Tai Chi classes and just realizing this fits in with our style, this is what we need, sort of thing, really. So yeah, so I'd like to do a bit of Tai Chi, but link it up with maybe the Kung Fu, or I often find it hard to plan until I know who's there.
Yeah.
I can bring it. I have a plan in my head.
Yeah.
Unless I know the audience and see what people want to partake, I can sort of adapt it there and then, sort of thing, a lot of the time. So, but yeah, but the Tai Chi is just opened up so many different doors in my own training.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Again, there's as you mentioned earlier on with regards to principles. The principles are the principles regardless of what name you give it.
Yeah.
And so that applies throughout. So that's great. I mean, that would be a really interesting exploration into how everything sort of fits together. So I'm looking forward to that. Right. In the meantime, my friend, how can people reach you if they want to speak to you before the festival itself?
There's not many Hudds, thank goodness. Just Google Matt Hudd Martial Arts, really. Because we're all on Facebook, we've got a website, got a small YouTube channel going out. But we're almost social media.
Okay.
So quite easy to find.
Okay, yeah, I'll try and make sure I put the link in the description below for those that want to find that. And that's great, my friend. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on today and having a chat, and thank you for coming along to the festival. And we look forward to seeing you then.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. So keep up the good work.
Cheers, buddy.
Brilliant.